Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Smokey Dave Presents. The holidays are fast approaching, and so it's time to make some candy. So, on today's episode, we're going to be making some smoked dark chocolate and caramel candy. We're going to make the caramel as well. It's so much better than any kind of caramel you can buy in the store prepackaged, so stay tuned. So 1 cup of cream, 5 tablespoons of ghee, 1 teaspoon of vanilla. We're going to have some salt. We're going to be using 1 1/4 teaspoon because this is salted caramel. 1 1/2 cups of either this kind, Demerara or Toronado or Rapdura. Let me just pause right here for a moment to pronounce these 3 types of sugars correctly. It's turbinado, demerara, or rapadura. Either of those. Those are all raw sugars. Sugar that still have the molasses in it. Going to be using a 1/4 cup of honey and another 1/4 cup of dark molasses. And that's it. So I'm going to grease this pan that I'm going to be putting the caramel in. I'm going to also put parchment paper in there. This will help to release the caramel easily when we're ready, after it's solidified. We'll put a little bit of the oil on the parchment as well. We'll cut a piece that just fits in there, and the weight of the caramel will hold it down, once we're ready. And you'll see that here in a few minutes. We're going to place 1.5 cups of our sugar to a large pot. Alright, so now we're going to be putting in the 1/4 cup of honey. Honey right here. Putting in a 1/4 cup of that to the pot. You want to use your little spatula because it is only a 1/4 cup and half of it'll stay inside the cup if you don't. That looks pretty good, I guess. Same with the molasses. It's thick. So that goes in with the sugar into the pot. The water that goes in there too. Alright. Alright, so the sugar pot is done. Alright, so here's the second pot that we're going to be making up. And this has the cup of cream. So that uses about half of one of these. Five tablespoons of ghee, of our ghee. Scrape that in. Now you can make ghee yourself. I don't yet. I may try it sometime. And if I do, I'll probably smoke it. Ghee is shelf stable, so it's better than butter for that reason. Well, I won't say it can't go rancid, but it won't go rancid for a very long time anyway. And certainly if you keep it in a cool, dark place, it should last for a long time. So 1 1/4 teaspoon of salt goes in, of the sea salt. And then finally, 1 teaspoon of real vanilla extract. You get a little extra in there, that's okay. I always let a little extra dribble in. And that's it. Now we gotta cook them. Alright, we're cooking both of the ingredients in their separate pots right now. The cream in one and the sugar in the other. Now you'll see that I have 3 thermometers, 2 in the pot, 1 sitting on the counter there. The glass one is a real, true candy thermometer. The long one with the dial is a meat thermometer. I won't be using that because it'll just get in the way when we're trying to mix in, and we have to be constantly stirring that. I'll use the candy thermometer to get close, and then I'll use the digital one sitting on the counter there to get exact. And you have to be pretty exact with candy. This caramel needs to come up to 248 degrees when everything's mixed together. If it gets above 250, it'll get too hard. If it gets below 248, it'll be too soft at room temperature. It'll be gooey. And so we really need to try to keep it. So that only gives us a couple, 2-3 degrees of wiggle room. So it's very important that we watch that temperature very carefully while we're mixing. So first we'll heat the sugar up until it's boiling and boiled off most of the water. We'll also be heating up the cream mixture, but as soon as that's boiling, we'll take that off the heat and set it aside, and then we'll slowly mix it in. So let's get started. All right, so the caramel is coming up to temperature now, and it is ready for us to pour in the cream mixture. We're going to do this not all at once. We want to slowly pour it in because it's going to release a lot of steam as we do it. So we have the steam hood on to help with that. And now it's just a waiting game, watching that temperature, watching it like a hawk. Once we hit that 248 degree mark, we need to be able to immediately take it off the heat and pour it into our parchment lined pan. So I'm sitting here mixing and watching. So this is really the trickiest part here, trying to coordinate both hands and keep your eye on that temperature. But we're coming up real close to the time. I grabbed the parchment pan as quickly as I could with my third arm and brought it in over here onto the stove. It's getting close, and it's about time to pour. And there it is. It's time to pour. Can't waste any time here. Cannot allow that to get up to 250 degrees or above, or it will be rock hard. And I don't want to break anyone's teeth. So we pour this into the parchment, and it looks like it's still boiling, but within just a minute or two, it will settle right down. All those bubbles will come out, as you can see. And then we'll just let this sit here until it hardens up enough and cools down enough before we put it in the refrigerator. Don't want to put that directly in. We definitely want to let that cool a little bit. Now, after about 10-15 minutes, it will have cooled enough where we want to sprinkle our sea salt on the outside surface. So we'll do that now, and then we'll put it in the refrigerator. I've set up a double boiler here in order to melt the chocolate that we're going to use on the outside of these caramels. Now, you always want to use a double boiler when you're melting chocolate so you don't burn it. You don't want it to get above, you don't really want it to be at boiling temperature either. So we'll just keep this at a nice warm temperature, just enough to melt the chocolate. And what I got here is some Ghirardelli 90% cacao that I smoked a month or two ago. So it's got a nice smoked flavor with it. And I'll add a little bit more plain chocolate. Again, 90% cacao, but without the smoke flavor, because actually this is pretty intense and I wanted to just kind of pull that back a little bit. And so we'll let this melt, and then we'll get on to how I dip the caramels. Okay, so I got the caramel. It had been overnight in the refrigerator, so it's perfect now. So we'll get that out of the pan, and it'll come out quite easy because of the fact that we used the parchment and sprayed a little oil on the pan and the parchment itself. And as you can see from the one side of that, I did do some testing to make sure it was good caramel. And when you slice these up, there'll always be little bits and edges and stuff, which I call chef's privilege. So keep that in mind. So we're just going to use a standard pizza cutter. You want to make sure it's clean. You might even want to put a little dab of oil on it. It doesn't really need it. There's enough oil in the caramel. It typically won't stick too bad as long as things aren't too warm. And of course I use gloves. That helps keep fingerprints and things like that off the caramel. It just makes it so much easier. Things don't stick to the rubber gloves quite as much. And so we're just going to slice these into Tootsie Roll size thickness. And then once they're all sliced into strips, then we'll slice them in the other direction and make them into little cubes, as you can see here. I'm almost done at this point. You can see the salt that's on the top, and it sticks on pretty well. So this salted caramel is quite delicious just as it is now, but we're going to make it better. So now we're going to slice these into little cubes and put them on a tray, and then we'll put that tray into the freezer for about 15 minutes because we want these cubes to get very hard and very cold. That way they'll take on a lot more chocolate when we dip them and give them a nice thick chocolate shell. So once I got a full tray here, we'll get these into the freezer, and we'll throw the other ones into the refrigerator. Now we're going to use my enrobing machine. Now you can get yourself a real expensive enrobing machine. Cost $4,000 or $5,000 if you want. And this is just an old fork that I bent. The way I use it is pretty straightforward. You pick up a candy, you place it on the fork, you dip it in the chocolate, you pick it up with your gloved hand and you stick it on the other tray. And that's what we're going to do. And then of course once we fill up this tray, we'll put that back in the freezer. The chocolates will freeze. And then once they're frozen, we'll put them in a container. And that's just how you do it. Now, once the chocolates had time to freeze in the freezer, they'll pop right off this parchment and right into a little box here. And they're irregularly shaped. They got little things on the bottom of chocolate, little extra pieces for people. Yep, they're not. These are certainly homemade chocolates. 100 times better than anything you could ever buy. Unless, of course, you buy candy that someone made like this. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed that video about making your own chocolate-covered caramels. With the holiday season coming up, nothing like a good smoked chocolate-covered caramel in your stocking. At any rate, if you like this video and you like our content, would you consider subscribing and hitting that like button? It really helps our channel, and of course, anything that I use in any of the videos I do that you can order, I have in links below. That also helps the channel, and I much appreciate it. So until next time, don't forget, it's no joke, everything's better with smoke.